Good morning, you're listening to FloorDaily.net, and I'm Kemp Harr. I'm in Washington, D.C. at the Flooring Sustainability Summit, and I'm with Cheryl Durst, the CEO of the IIDA. Cheryl, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Kemp. How are you?
I'm good. I got to compliment Bill Greasy for bringing you here again a second time to be one of the main keynote speakers at this sustainability conference. I want to start with a little background. 10 years ago, you and I did a leadership article, Floor Focus, and I invite our listeners to go back to October of 2016. A couple of highlights from that. You'd studied both journalism and economics, and you've been running the IIDA for 30 years. The IIDA is an organization with 15,000 members. Their focus is to make a space not only functional, but aesthetically gorgeous. And it's neat to have them at the table here. And by the way, they're the only group that can come to this meeting without paying a fee because of how critical they are in the built environment.
Right, absolutely. And I think for designers to be in contact, communication, and collaboration with manufacturers, it's critical to our industry. Our industry is such an interconnected ecosystem. We don't exist without one another, and certainly what gets brought to clients and consumers and end users requires that collaboration. A lot of what I've been hearing over the past day or so at the conference is we need a stronger communication between those groups, right? We are approaching sustainability. I think we share the same commitment to sustainability, but how we get there, whether it's through specifications that designers are doing, product that manufacturers are creating, it is really critical, especially now. Everything is much more complex. You mentioned that we spoke 10 years ago. A lot has changed in 10 years, most notably the volatility of the market, the complexity, but also the proliferation of sustainability, their proliferation of standards and criteria. And I don't know that we always understand or are always speaking the same language. And so what I'll be talking to the group about is a common lexicon. I think I talked about that the very first Flooring Sustainability Conference that I came to. Language matters. It's interesting, we're sitting here in Washington, D.C. I actually started my career here. I was a teacher. I taught high school here in Washington, D.C. I taught English composition, I taught communication, and I think it's just vitally critical that we all become better storytellers about who we are and what we do, and the value that we all find in the built environment.
In one of the first panels that we had yesterday, it was brought up that it's the interior designer's role to hold our feet to the fire and to interject a materials pledge. So without the interior designer, who's going to make sure that we're watching out for what the materials are made out of and that we're focused on sustainability?
Well, material integrity for sure. And I think along with the things that you mentioned earlier, having an effective, efficient interior, designers have an ethical obligation to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the occupants of the spaces that they're creating. And so when that is foremost in the mind, that often changes that conversation. I think a lot of people don't realize that protecting the public is a duty and an obligation, right? That is part of the Hippocratic Oath of design, is to do no harm. To me, conferences like this, and although the focus is sustainability, I think we are all talking about our obligation to protect the public in the built environment.
We're doing this interview prior to you doing your speech, and I haven't heard it yet, but give us a couple of the highlights of what you intend to tell the audience today.
Yeah, I am talking about this idea of a narrative of communication and how we are approaching what's on the floor through a very different lens. The single part of a room that every one of us actually touches is the floor. And it also turns out to be one of the best places in the entire built environment to build a circular economy, precisely because it's a composite material that has to perform under our feet for years, sometimes decades before it comes back. I really applaud manufacturers for taking that knowledge and finding more novel ways to use recycled material and lowering the carbon footprint. I think part of the conversation that's important is for design to celebrate the manufacturing community. You built the products, but I want to talk about with the group today how we can help the world understand what that means. And so my thesis, quite simply, is there's no mistaking it. Nothing beats the power of a good story, right? That's the emotional side. So not necessarily a better spec sheet, not a longer certification list, not a denser data table. Design exists in service to humanity, and it reflects humanity. Human beings are naturally drawn to stories, and we are wired to tell them to each other, about ourselves. Our brains are always searching for meaning, and our stories help us make sense of the world, just like design helps us make sense of the world. And that's why manufacturers are critical. I always like to say that every where has a why. Every space that we walk into, a cafeteria, a corridor, a hotel lobby, a courtroom, exists because somebody at some point made a series of decisions about what that space needed to do for the humans who would move through it. The flooring in a memory care facility isn't just slip-resistant vinyl. It's a decision that somebody made about dignity, about a person's final years being spent somewhere safe. The flooring in an elementary school isn't just a budget line. It's a decision about whether a 5-year-old spends her days breathing clean air in a space that was designed to protect her. And I say protect deliberately because young kids spend an enormous amount of time really low to the ground in a layer of dust and off-gassing that settles closest to the floor. If the flooring isn't thoughtfully considered, her health could suffer. That's not a marketing angle. That's the actual truth about who is most vulnerable to what's underfoot. And it's one of the most powerful stories the flooring industry has to tell, if you choose to tell it that way. The human story, not the data sheet, always wins out. And that's the distinction that I'm going to talk about with the group today, and I want to draw because I think it's the whole ball game, to not just talk about materiality, but to talk about craft. Don't just hand a designer the product life cycle. Tell them a life story. A life cycle assessment tells a designer what happens to a material mechanically across its existence. A life story tells them who made it and why, what it costs somebody in ingenuity and years of R&D to get it right, and what it will mean for the next family or patient or traveler who lives their life on top of it. Designers need both, right? That's the reality. They need the data and they need the narrative, but only one of those two things moves the heart. And it turns out that hearts, even in a business-to-business industry as technical as this one, the heart is what gets things specified.
Those are great remarks. I think you said earlier that we both have the same goal, the manufacturers and the designers. It's just a different lens, right?
Yeah, it's just a different lens. And just making sure that we are, right? It's like having bifocals, Kemp. I'm at that age. It's making sure that we're seeing life and work and design and humanity through both of those lenses.
Cheryl, one thing I want to mention real quick. You and your organization has driven the change in name for what NeoCon is in Chicago. It was your all's idea to call this Chicago Design Week, and I think it's sticking, don't you?
I think it is. I'm seeing it more and more in print and the media. I'm hearing designers reference it, even people in the city of Chicago, and it really was about not creating a competitive atmosphere, but recognizing that geographically, during those days in Chicago, we need to be in a multiplicity of places. And so it encompasses what needs to get done in the Merchandise Mart, what needs to get done in Fulton Market, and then all of the adjacent neighborhoods that are also celebrating design in Chicago.
Well, thanks for spending time with me and my listeners and telling us about your speech today at the Flooring Sustainability Summit. Again, we're talking to Cheryl Durst, the CEO of the IIDA, and you've been listening to Kemp Harr and FloorDaily.net.